Hello, welcome to this final recording on partnerships. So the last thing we have to look at is this concept of the limited liability partnership, which was created by the statute of the same name. Now, basically, the idea here was to create something which was a bit of a hybrid between a company and a partnership. So this was created about the time when lots of lawsuits were kicking around, big firms had failed, and people were looking for someone to blame. And quite often the accountants were coming out on the wrong end of that stick. So they asked for a vehicle to be created, which would allow them to keep the sort of structure of a partnership business that they'd always used, but gave them the protection of limited liability. So a LLP, like a company, is a separate legal personality, and the partners, or sometimes called members of that LLP, have the benefit of limited liability, limited to the amount of capital that they've contributed to the LLP. So in order to set up your LLP, because it's got the benefit of limited liability for its members, then you're subject to a certain amount of regulation. So when you set up your LLP, you need an incorporation document signed by two members, and those two members are what we call the designated members. So in addition to signing the incorporation document, they also are responsible for signing the annual confirmation statement and any returns that need to be delivered to the registrar. So on this incorporation document, you give the name of your LLP, subject to the same restrictions as a company name would be. You give the location of your registered office and your registered office address in the same way a company would, and names and addresses of all the members of the LLP. And you pay a fee, of course. And those documents compile the company record, the LLP record, which is maintained at Companies House. Now, an LLP will usually have a partnership agreement. It's not necessary, but as with an ordinary partnership, it's better to have something which sets out how you're going to operate your business, so internal regulation. Now, there is no requirement to file the partnership agreement at Companies House, which I always find slightly odd, because to me the similar document would be the company's Articles of Association, and they have to be filed at Companies House. So a little bit more privacy is available to partners with an LLP. They can actually keep the details of their internal operations a little bit more secret than perhaps a company could. Now, other than that, the regulations that apply to a company pretty much apply to LLPs as well. Okay, so how is the LLP regulated? Well, it's subject to the same provisions as a company on the whole, just a few small modifications. So you must keep and maintain accounting records. You must publish your accounts, and you must be audited, and you're subject to the same small and medium-sized audit exemptions as a company would be. You must maintain a register of charges and a charge with company's registrar, and notify changes of membership. Designated members, remember, are the two special members, a bit like the company secretary, who do those extra responsibilities. You must put the name of your LLP on your correspondence and advertise it outside your place of business, and deliver your annual confirmation statement to the registrar. An LLP can be wound up in very similar ways to a company, so if you can show unfair prejudice, although this can be excluded if all of the members agree. And a member of an LLP can be guilty of fraudulent or wrongful trading, and is also subject to disqualification in the same way as a director would be under the CDDA. Now, what are the authority of a partner in an LLP? Well, basically, every member of an LLP is an agent of the LLP, and he has the power to bind the LLP. But the partnership will not be bound where the member does not have authority and the third party is aware that he doesn't have authority or doesn't believe him to be a partner. So that's the same as the partnership rule, I think, there. The only difference there being that a partner who is a member of an LLP has the authority to bind the LLP, but he doesn't bind the other partners individually. And the reason for that is that the LLP is a separate legal entity, whereas in an ordinary partnership, the partnership doesn't really exist, so therefore he has to bind the individual partners. What happens when we want to wind up an LLP? Well, it works in a similar way to a company. We can do it by agreement, unanimously. Or we can go to court and follow a formal procedure for winding up. We can also, if we're insolvent, we could also go through the voluntary arrangement route, or administration, or voluntary and compulsory liquidation. And you remember we went through those in the previous chapter. There are just a couple of tiny exceptions for an LLP. And these do make it slightly more onerous. So if a member of an LLP has withdrawn funds from the LLP within 2 years of the winding up, then that can be clawed back, presumably by the insolvency practitioners, if they can show that the member either knew or had reasonable grounds to know that the LLP was or would become insolvent as a result of that withdrawal. In addition, present members can be asked to contribute to the assets of an LLP on its winding up if they've agreed to do so in any previous LLP agreement. So again, you'd want to read that agreement quite carefully, because you could have been retired for quite a while and then find out you have to make a contribution to the partnership. Have a look at IQ 25. Just pause the recording while you have a go at it. Okay, so part A, that is clearly false, isn't it? A benefit for participants of a partnership over a company is that because it has separate legal personality, they have limited liability. That's the wrong way round. B, that's true, isn't it? So a company will continue even if the participants change. If you buy shares in Boots PLC, then Boots PLC won't be affected by that. C, a benefit of a limited company over a partnership is that a company's liability is limited. That's false, isn't it? Be careful you don't get sucked in on that one. The liability of the shareholders of a company is limited. The company's liability is unlimited. And D, a benefit of a partnership over a company is that the partnership is not subject to any legislative regulation. That also is false. Although an ordinary partnership, is more lightly regulated than a company, it is still regulated. Okay, if we just go over the page there, you'll see that we have a little table. Now this is quite nice for revision, so I'm not going to go through it all in great detail now because we've actually already seen all of this, but this would be nice when you're trying to just get those little facts into your brain in the run up to the exam. But you see there, for each of a sole trader, a partnership, an LLP and a company, we've set out what those requirements are. So you can see there, for a sole trader, very little formality, fairly relaxed formation rules and also winding up rules, going right across to an LLP and a company where things are much, much stricter. So use that for your revision. See, it goes all the way through, right down to management rights, administration and withdrawal of capital. Okay, you're now ready to have a go at some questions. Please have a look in your question bank and see how you get on. I'll see you for the next chapter.